Hi, this is for Communications 101, Quote Link Chapter 5 and 6. So Chapter 5, the first thing I want to highlight about Chapter 5 is that some people hear, but they just aren't listening. I mean, we've all said it, we've all experienced it when you're talking to someone and there's no response, right? And you're like, man, you just don't get it, you just aren't listening to me. So what is listening? If someone is hearing you but not listening, well, what does that mean? Well, the book describes listening as, defines distinctly, listening is the process we use to make sense out of what we hear. It's a complex process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to verbal and nonverbal messages, including selecting, attending, understanding, remembering, and responding. I think what the author is saying in this is that it's an engagement. It's an active process. When we listen passively, we're just hearing things, but we're not engaged or in tune to the other person and what their needs are or what they're trying to communicate to us. I know in my own life this is so true. When I'm talking to someone who doesn't have the time of day for me or is busy doing something else, I realize there is not the same depth of communication or feedback as if someone were to be directly talking to me and putting themselves aside so that they can hear exactly what I have to say. Now, this is also true for myself when I am engaged in taking notes in class or anything like that. When I am actively engaged in listening, I'm looking for body language. I'm reading nonverbals. I'm looking for the message that is below or under the message that's being said in between the lines, right? So when I write notes and things like that, I get so much more out of the class and I'm so much more engaged than if I were to sit passively and not engage in trying to understand all the different nonverbal signs that are being spoken to me. Concept 2 of Chapter 5. Empathetic listening is at the heart of all successful communication. And the quote I want to bring out about that is this quote from Henry Nouwen that was in Communication Principles for a Lifetime. To listen is very hard because it asks so much of us, so much interior stability that we no longer need to prove ourselves by speeches, arguments, statements, or declarations. True listeners no longer have an inner need to make their presence known. They are free to receive, to welcome, to accept. Listening is a form of spiritual hospitality by which you invite strangers to become friends, to get to know their inner selves more fully, and even dare to be silent with you. I love this quote because I think it's so true. What the authors are bringing out is that to really engage in listening, I need to be confident enough in myself to be able to put myself and my needs aside, just to be able to focus on another person and to hear their thoughts and to hear everything that they're communicating to me, their emotions, their needs, right? The psychologist Carl Rogers says that empathy is a way of being, right? It's a way of life. It's not just a one-time thing, but it's absolutely something that can be learned and can be integrated into daily life and daily communications with everybody that we meet. I wonder if we can really have quality listening interactions if we don't have empathy, if we're not considering the thoughts and the feelings of others and how they see the world. Because empathy is at the heart of putting our needs aside and focusing on the emotions of others. I know that in my own life, when people are empathetic with me, when they're listening fully engaged with me, it's so much easier to open up and to share my heart, to share my thoughts with people, because they feel safe, because they are understanding me and they're not judging me, they're not criticizing me. So I think being empathetic in my listening skills will make other people feel safe around me in return. Empathetic listening also invites people into that deeper intimacy and trust in relationship, where the quote even brought out that they would dare to be silent with you. I think when you build that trust level and that heart connection, people will be safe to be themselves and to even be silent and connect in that way. Chapter 6, Culture and Communications. Now, the first main point I want to bring out in Chapter 6 is this: that everyone is unique and therefore everyone is diverse. So diversity is going to meet you on your doorstep. The quote from Chapter 6, Communication, the Principle for a Lifetime, says this: as C.S. Lewis observed in the quotation that opens this chapter, there are no ordinary people, which implies that each one of us is unique. I think this is such a key concept to bring out, even in interacting with people all around us, even of our own culture, whether it's our age, our ethnicity, our gender, our sexual orientation. All these different aspects of who we are as people play into our interactions with others, and we're all different, we're all diverse, and I think understanding that will help us not just group everyone together with generalizations or stereotypes, but it will set the individual apart so that we can really understand who they are as a person and get to know them. And also outside of our culture, understanding other cultures' values, understanding their time orientation, their high-low context, understanding what makes up them as a people. And especially as the book brings out that diversity is meeting us here at our own doorstep, that it's very highly likely that we are going to communicate with somebody even today that is not from our same cultural background. So understanding that even within our own culture there's diversities, and then outside of our culture that is being integrated into our daily lives, there's diversity in all those aspects. I think it's so important to understand so that we can have a good sound level of communication. So communication competence really encompasses learning another culture, learning your own culture first so that you can learn another culture's, learning your own identity so that you can interpret another person's identity accurately. In my personal life, I have a very good friend of mine who did not grow up in America, and very different cultural background. And I am learning to appreciate all these different aspects about him that are not cohesive, or they're not the same, I should say, as my own culture. And so embracing those differences, learning about my own culture, learning about how I value time, what I see as important, learning about my own background, helps me to then interpret his and what's important to him, and if relationship is more important to him than the task, that would be traditionally more important to me in an individualistic culture, and he's coming from a collectivistic culture. So all these different aspects of culture, breaking them down and learning what I am used to, and then learning what he's used to, is bridging that gap and forging a strong relationship that I believe will last a lifetime. The second point I want to bring out to you in Chapter 6 is this: for every cultural barrier, there is a cultural bridge that will span the gap and bring unity in intercultural relationships and harmony. And the quote I want to read to you from the chapter is this: Is it possible to develop relationships with people who are different than us? Yes, of course. Bridging culture and gender differences is possible. And then a little bit further on in the chapter it says that discovering how we are alike can provide a starting point for human understanding. What I really like about this is that it brings hope into all those cultural situations that just seem like it's over our heads, and the difference between us is so different that there would be no possible way to bridge that gap. And what the chapter brings out is that yes, it is totally possible to overcome our differences. If we look at the similarities between us, we can find enough common ground to start building a strong relationship. The chapter goes on to give us several tools in order to do that. In the area of knowledge, we can seek information, we can ask the right questions, we can open ourselves up to understanding. In the area of motivation, we can tolerate the ambiguity and develop mindfulness to make ourselves more aware of what is going on around us and how what we're saying is affecting them and how their culture affects our culture, right? So we can develop this awareness that's been the theme throughout the entire book. And in the third category is just the development of our skill, becoming more other-oriented and focused. In the third category is developing our skill, and we develop our focus and our attention on other people and becoming other-oriented, where we no longer focus on our own self and our own needs, but we can put ourselves aside, like that one quote said earlier about the confident listener, putting ourselves aside so that we can fully engage in what the other person is saying, that we can connect in that manner. It's also developing the sense of empathy and being able to feel. In the area of skill, we can become others-oriented and focus our attention and our thoughts directly to the other person, what they're saying, so that we can perceive more readily all of the nonverbal and the verbal messages that are coming at us, that we will be able to read between the lines and receive the full message. It also talks about developing that sense of empathy and really not just being sympathetic and consoling with the other person, but really feeling what that person is feeling and going through, and really having a heart that's open and listening, and just fully connecting to that other person and what they're going through and encouraging them in that process. And finally, we can ethically adapt to other people, keeping our ethics in place, keeping that dignity towards the other people, and in the sense of knowing what is right and wrong for us, that we can still maintain that even as we adapt to other cultures and even as we adapt to another lifestyle or way of doing things that may be different from our own culture. I think all these things are very important, and I've seen even in my own life when I am able to first of all see that yes, even though that we're worlds apart and culturally different, that there is still something that is common between us. There is still a bond of humanity, and that we can build on that, and that we can start a friendship even based on that bond and build from there. That I have those tools in place and that skill set I can access and go to when I need to encounter, or when I have encounters that are not of my culture. It gives me a great hope and a great confidence that even though this is different and maybe it's difficult for me, I can still engage here, that there's no cultural differences too great to not have relationship in, and that I can have a relationship with any person of any culture. And if I'm struggling, hey, these are the tools I can use to build up these relationships. developing a sense of empathy has gone a long way for me, even in understanding where another person is coming from, being inside or outside of my culture, and just understanding the challenges that come with cross-culture communication or culture shock or whatever that other person is going through. So just having an open heart and an open mind just to listen and to understand that it's not as easy as we'd like to think it is sometimes. I think even that just builds the bridge of communication. And though I may not be able to fix everything that happens or fix the problems, I can understand and I can relate and I can feel what they're feeling. And that alone goes a long way in communication.